Christopher Price joins us on the Volkswagen Dealers Expert Hotline. Hello, Christopher.
I'm telling you, this Roman Fifer talk, John Wallach can attest to this, is giving me life, man. I love this stuff. This 01 to 04 team with the Dynasty, that's when I first started covering this team. Yeah. And it was just, I agree with John. I heard him talking about this before. It was just different back then, man.
Yeah, it was before. I mean, just as an outsider, I didn't hate him. And it was all a surprise at first, and
it was fun. It was fun to watch this team finally win.
And I almost thought that, good luck with Belichick, that weirdo, with this dumb note that he left for the Jets. I remember where I was.
You remember Kevin Mannix, who is the uncle of Chris Mannix, who we have on. Kevin Mannix used to write for the Boston Herald, and Christopher Price remembers this. Mm-hmm. When they hired Belichick, Kevin Mannix, because of what he did to the Jets, called him duplicitous pond scum.
Well, Ian O'Connor from the Daily News or the Post wrote that he was going to be a massive failure too, and owns it. It's kind of funny that he still does. But I thought that Belichick was a weirdo with a mental problem, the way that he. And then I thought it was great that the Jets got the first round pick. I thought it was the greatest thing ever. So, that's why I'm such a great executive. But Christopher, how about me owning Wallach with the Roman Fifer thing as well? Coming
I love
in
it.
hot.
I'll say this too, man. The thing about Roman Fifer, the one thing I do remember, and John is absolutely spot on about this. They loved him so much or Belichick loved him so much that he allowed him to leave after the game and didn't have to come back until Wednesday. They called him the Jinx because he never played in a playoff game before he came to New England. Brian Cox used to call him the Jinx, and he used to joke with him about just saying, you know what? We're never going to make the playoffs as long as Roman Fifer is here, because he's the worst luck ever, and he goes on to win 3 Super Bowl rings in 4 years. So great guy, great interview, but yeah.
Brian Cox, another Jet that Bill Belichick brought in.
They went into great detail about that Brian Cox hit on Pathon, the Indianapolis. That was the first game that Brady started that set the tone for the defense.
He's still alive, Brian Cox.
He was an assistant defensive line coach for the Falcons the year of the Falcons-Patriots Super Bowl. Okay. And so it was fun to kind of go back and revisit with him. He offered to, in the lead up to that game, I know this isn't in the Dynasty, but in the lead up to the Colts game, we went in and asked him, hey, what do you think about this great Colts team? They're averaging 40 points a game. Peyton Manning's lighting the league on fire. And he responded with, I'm not the kind of man to blank another man's blank.
Yeah, Cox was great. He was a big star.
Yeah.
I mean, based on his mouth. Yeah. He was a great quote.
And we said, Brian, we can't really put that in the newspaper. And he just kind of shrugged his shoulders and said, well, whatever, that's my quote.
Well, now you could. You just have to put the ampersands in it. Now, was that, so you mentioned that you were covering the team back then. Was it more fun? Because was there that veil of secrecy over the organization? It sounds like there wasn't. I mean, I know Felger's relationship with Belichick was strong at that time. Was it easier to cover the team at that time?
It was a little bit easier, yeah. And also part of it, Fred, was there was no social media. There was no Twitter. There was no racing to get stuff, online immediately. It was a different era, journalistically. And so you could, take a little bit more time. I remember writing a whole big thing in December about how Belichick has changed. And I remember spending 20 minutes in the locker room talking to Otis Smith in a one-on-one situation. There were guys that we talked about the Roman Fifer thing. There were his guys like Roman Fifer, not so much Brian Cox, but Anthony Pleasant, Otis Smith. Those were the guys that followed him from stop to stop, from Cleveland, Pepper Johnson for a while, then he became the coach. But he had those guys, and those guys were so important to that team that year that they kind of, the buy-in that those guys, those veterans demonstrated, a lot of the younger guys, kind of jumped on board.
How much do you find Twitter to be useless in your job, in that there's this race to get just factoids out? Because I know what you're saying, because your job as a writer really is to create context and background. I'm not saying it right, but you know what I'm saying? It's not just to state a sentence of fact. How much do you guys resent Twitter, and is that as important today as it was 2 years ago?
I resent Twitter. I do. I see it, I think, as a really important part of the job. At the same time, the need to have something like that to be able to disseminate information. I don't want to go into detail on Twitter. That's when things get lost. Like you take a sentence of a quote that, widely out of context, and then it gets everyone in.
Oh, geez.
Did we lose him?
Elon Musk
I was going to say.
just stepped up and took him off.
The Twitterazzi is taking over.
Because I am interested. I want to get him
Or
back.
if I'm at the stadium.
Wait.
Yeah.
Okay, so we lost you for like a solid 20 seconds. So start over. So you resent Twitter. Go ahead. Why?
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting because you need it. It's you have to have it if you're a working journalist. You really do. You have to have it if you're a working journalist. It's very, very important. But it can be a distraction. It's great for real-time information. If I want to know, like if the Patriots are playing the Cowboys this week, and I want to know that there's a question about Dak Prescott's health status. He was out of Wednesday's practice. That's great to be able to find that out in real time and to be able to digest it. But I think when it becomes an issue is taking quotes out of context, taking information out of context. Like you said, it's important to be able to have some sort of context and to be able to deliver a larger look at something. There's also no room for nuance, too. If there's black and white to a story, it's great. But if there's shades of gray as to something that we're discussing, I think it can be an issue sometimes. It really can. It's a great point, Fred.
How much do publishers put pressure on you guys to be first? Yeah. Because you say you write these great pieces and they're uncovering information, but they're in the Globe and they're articles. How much? And I'm sure they want that from you. But how much pressure is there? Will they go like, well, hey, like so-and-so had this like thing on Twitter before you. They had it like 10 minutes before you on Twitter. Do they come down on you for that? Is that important? And if it is as important as it was, again, now as it was a couple of years ago?
Not where I am right now. And not so much in my job. But my job really on Twitter with the stuff that I do, like I wrote a piece on Eliot Wolf that came out on Friday.
Right.
And so what you want to do, the great thing about Twitter in this instance, is you want to bait the hook with just enough information to make people go, oh, look, that's a really interesting story. Okay, I'm gonna point and click on that. Mike Giardi, God bless him, has a great thing that I basically lifted from him where he takes kind of the best quote out of the story and puts that in, uses that as the tweet. And so you say, oh, okay, this looks really interesting because of this quote. I'm gonna, point and click on that. So not so much anymore, but yeah, I've had jobs before where it's important to be able to post it first, and then you also don't want to give away too much information in the if you're a boss, you don't want to have your employee give away too much information in the tweet,
right?
Because there's no reason to click on the story then. So it is even after all these years, we're still wrestling with how to use it properly, I think.
Yeah. Hopefully it's not forever. It doesn't seem like people are on as much anymore. All right, so you brought up, I've read the Eliot Wolf article, and Eliot Wolf, it seems like as time progresses, is going to be a big decision maker, if not the decision maker, in the front office for the Patriots. And from what you're hearing, this doesn't sound like the worst idea.
No, it doesn't sound like the worst idea. The one thing, and I shared this with some folks the other day too, who are asking for more information about him. No one around the league, on or off the record, has said a bad word to me about him. This is a guy who's really, busted his ass and worked hard and, hasn't kind of coasted on his father's name when he probably could have coasted on his father's name. His father, for those who don't know, was a Hall of Fame executive, Ron Wolf, a guy who really built those Green Bay teams in the 1990s. It sounds like he's going to be the guy moving forward. His fingerprints are all over these hires: Alonzo Highsmith, Alex Van Pelt, Ben McAdoo. It's clear that he has a vision for this team, and he has kind of moved into that power vacuum that's, been created ever since the departure of Belichick. So, look, I think it's going to be a good move. I don't know. I'm being relatively optimistic here. I don't know if I'm going full Rochi on you, but it is I see it as a bit of a positive.
Chris, now the dust is kind of settled on all the moves that the Patriots have made. Coaching staff seems to be mostly in place, as is the front office. You were just talking about it. It seems like they have a lot of guys that are in their roles for the first time in their careers, starting with Eliot Wolf, who's never had final say on a draft. Gerard Mayo's never been a head coach. You have Covington, who's never been a defensive coordinator. Even Alex Van Pelt really hasn't had full play calling duties. I mean, how are you feeling about the Patriots right now? There isn't a lot of experience there, and if you add a high draft pick who's a rookie that they want to be their starting quarterback, I think there might be some problems there.
Yeah, well, I don't know if there's going to be some problems, but I will say this. I do agree with you that I would have liked for them to have hired someone in some sort of, even maybe as like a figurehead role, where you bring in an assistant head coach, associate head coach, who was also the, I don't know, the backup offensive line coach or whatever the case may be. Someone who has experience around the league, someone who could kind of be a voice in Gerard Mayo's ear. I think that Alex Van Pelt right now, it kind of has to serve that role. I think he's been like 29 years between coaching and playing. And so he does have that experience. He does have that background. He does have, he's been around for an awful long time. But yeah, I agree with you, John. I think that they would be well served by finding a veteran voice on that coaching staff and maybe there's still time to fill that role. Who knows? But I think they need one more veteran voice in that group.
Well, according to Pro Football Talk, there's a bunch of age discrimination in the coaching ranks. So, you got to keep an eye on that. So, there's no time. I mean, if you're not hiring a 72, 74-year-old coach, right. I mean, you just hate old people.
Where'd Fangio wind up? Is he available? Where's Fangio?
Fangio wound up in Philly, didn't he?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Fangio is a defensive coordinator.
That's a really good hire. That's a really good hire.
Well, they said that in Miami, and then it didn't do nothing for Miami. I'll tell you that, Christopher Price.
But I will say this. I think Philly's a little bit of an older defense, and so they can handle a guy who's maybe a little older, like Fangio, maybe a little bit more old school. Who knows? But we'll see.
Gotta get those pussies in line. All right, Christopher Price, thank you for the time, sir. We appreciate you getting up on the holiday.
Thanks, guys. Take care. We'll talk soon.
See you later.
Thank you so much.